Okay, and I'm going to give just a quick update. Hi, welcome to the Monolithic calls. We just started. I forgot to record, so we're going to jump in. The point of these calls is to help us learn how to move monolithic applications to Kubernetes. And without further ado, we're going to continue with our introductions. Josh?
Hey everybody, my update is that from the demo last week, we have a merge that will be going into master that we can review, resolve some of the outstanding conflicts that we had with what exists in master, and we can take a look at those. Additionally, as an update, Scott is not able to join the call this week, but I wanted to give him kudos. He's been working very hard on a massive monolith move of a Drupal 7 CMS for one of our large customers, and he was successful with that. So anybody who wants PHP and specifically Drupal, Scott's your man. He is worth talking to for sure. So that's my update.
Okay. Go, Scott. And for those of you who are just now joining, we go around and we do an update or introduce yourself if you're new. If your camera's on, I'm going to pick on you and try to make you talk. If you want to pass, totally okay. Wave your hand or just say pass. Next in line, we have John, and these are all random, so I'm not going in any particular order. John and Nama, you're next.
Hello, this is John. I missed last week. I was in 2 weeks ago. I'm just kind of doing the fly on the wall thing again. I'm trying to figure out ways I can start to actually contribute to Kubernetes and everything. So I'm sort of starting here and seeing what you guys are doing, and then hopefully I can maybe start doing some more at some point. So.
Awesome. Good to see you. Next up, John Harris, a familiar face.
Hey everyone, how's it going? John Harris, Solutions Architect at Docker. I'm also a busy week, but I'm a +1 on the idea of delegating work. I was going to suggest maybe like a Trello board where we could assign people the open tasks and stuff like that. But hopefully I should have some cycles this week to work on.
Okay. I'm going to, in the doc I share with everyone, I'm going to start tracking these suggestions. Give me 1 second. We'll move on to the next person. Because that's a good idea. Okay, so next up we have Bill Glover.
Hi everyone, first time. I'm a technology architect with Accenture, based in London. I've only just watched the replay of the first call, so I'm missing a chunk, and I'm rapidly playing catch up by quickly scrolling through the Google Doc. I'm here partly personal interest, but partly moving monolithic applications seems to be a full-time employment at the moment. Not always to Kubernetes. It's a very interesting topic for me.
Awesome. So TR, what you've missed since the first call, we wrote a really great, really horrible Java application, and we've been trying to run it in Kubernetes in various ways and looking at where it breaks and what we can and can't do and exploring the deployment cycle a little bit.
Awesome.
And Bill, you have a PR as well, right? For Flyway?
Sorry, I don't understand. What's the question?
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought that that you had submitted a pull request. For...
No, I haven't. No.
Okay, wrong person. Sorry.
No worries.
If we can find that person, though, I would like to look at their pull request today. Okay, so moving on, Craig Nicholson, you are next in line on my Zoom.
Hey, I'm just here to learn more about Kubernetes and moving apps for production loads to Kubernetes. It's all brand new to me. I've attended a couple of meetings and missed a couple. So, back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, good to see you again. So next up we have Tony Bellamy.
Hello, my name is Tony Bellamy. I'm a lead engineer at Major League Soccer. Definitely also want to give kudos to what Josh mentioned earlier with Scott and Telemundo, because I used to work on that project. I know it quite intimately, and the work is pretty awesome, and it's definitely relevant for this space. That's all for me.
Cool, good to see you. Next up we have Joe English.
Yes. Hi, new here. I just started on a team where we're about to migrate 2 big old monoliths to Kubernetes. So just trying to learn what I can to minimize the pain of that.
Awesome. You're definitely in the right place. Next up, we have Sankat Patel.
Hey everyone, this is my first time to this meeting. Engineer at Egen Solutions, doing infrastructure work and just here to learn.
Awesome. And I think last is Sophia Profina.
Hi.
Cool.
I'm at developer relations at Docker and just listening along.
Cool. Good to see you again. All right, so we've had the Trello suggestion. I would like to look at Josh's pull request. Other than that, if we want to start putting ideas into the Google Doc for things we want to go over today, we can start going through those one at a time. And if anybody even just wants to add, like, catch us up to where we are, or talk about where we are and where we want to be, and do like a little bit of a grooming exercise, we can definitely do that as well. I'll probably add that if nobody else does. But I think first things first, I guess for the new folks, we have a GitHub repository called Java Prototype that is serving as basically a place where we can share code and collaborate. And there is a really horrible Java application that does some pretty crazy things, similar to what you're going to see if you try to migrate a larger application to Kubernetes. I think the big aspects of it are it will rapidly shrink and expand in memory size, just randomly and chaotically. And it is a web service that will connect to a MySQL backend that is kind of like blind to and attempt to save a record for every transaction over HTTP. And it does that both synchronously and asynchronously, so you see some kind of weird behavior there as well. And then in general, the whole application is kind of built with like worst practices possible. So we see things like a singleton will fail if the socket drops, but it won't reconnect. Like just in general, the application's just kind of troublesome. So we're currently in the process of, Josh gave us a really awesome demo last week where he's able to get up and running. And I forget what we ran into. We saw the memory problem and we were able to fix that. There was I think another issue in the logs we were debugging. And I think that kind of catches you guys up for this week. Any questions so far around what we've been working on? Okay. So first things first, do we want to cross into the Trello board conversation now, or do we want to do that at the end of the call? I vote we do it now. Cool. I'm going to do a screen share, so give me a second. And we can either create a Trello board or we can create we can use GitHub projects here. Has anybody ever used these before? Okay, I think just do like work for the monolithic cause. And we can do like a basic Kanban board. Yeah, here we go. So now we can like create issues and assign them to people here and work out of this thing. And at least this way we have a project, and when this project is done, we can move on to another one. If that works for everyone, I'm good at starting here.
That looks good to me.
Cool, thanks. Okay, so first things first, we can go through our current issues, do a little bit of grooming, and then we'll look at what we want to work on and maybe try to live demo some of this stuff. And we can add these to I can come back and add these to the project before our next call, so I'm not eating up our phone call with like grooming time. Let's see here. So we have a lot of stuff working that we've been working out of here. I think we should start at the older stuff and come forward, because I think this is kind of outdated. Yeah. Schema to migrate the MySQL database. I think it would be a good idea to talk about migrating this database over and fleshing out work for that. Since we already have issues kind of around that. Cool. Do we want to try to, so right now we have a real database that's actually running in Amazon. Do we want to try to actually do a live migration of this thing into a Kubernetes cluster? We've talked about this idea a couple of times. I think it would be wise to actually go through and set that up.
I think it would be helpful to populate it with a massive amount of data prior to the migration so that we can see the challenges involved with large data sets.
How big is massive? Like 5 gigs or like 100 gigs?
I think probably anything more than, say, 20 gigs would probably be helpful.
Okay. Has anybody ever done anything around live migration of MySQL before in the past, or any database migration for that matter? Nobody's migrated a database or done a cutover before?
Yeah, I've migrated more than a share of SQL Server databases in MySQL before.
Okay. Usually the way I've done it has been, we just flip the master-slave logic around. And if I remember correctly, that involved stopping a server. Like if the master's running, you create a slave. You tell the slave to read from the master, and the master starts setting over, or the slave reads the bin logs from the master, and then you can start and stop each service one at a time and flip the roles. Did I say that correctly?
Yep.
Okay, cool. So we probably want a proposal on how to do this migration.
And I think that was that first issue that Chris Short had assigned. I don't know if he's still intending to work the issue or remain on the calls, but that, I believe we captured some of the issues there.
Okay, so that's what this card is here?
Yeah.
I think we can do...
So, yeah, the HA legacy for master.
Okay, so I think I can do number 12. Bam.
Beautiful.
Beautiful, and that's assigned to me, so I'll take that one. Kubernetes setup, I think we already have a cluster up and running. We'll have our MySQL, I'll have that seeded with 20 plus gigs of data, and I'll have a proposal for what I think is best. Any questions there? Does anybody want to be involved in that whole process, or is it safe if I just do a demonstration next week?
Demo's great.
Cool. I think the schema to create the MySQL database is done, isn't that?
It will be with this merge. We have both a manual creation and then we have the additional pull request to use Flyway and make it application centric. So we can close the issue knowing that we're addressing it at least 2 fronts.
Okay. So let's close this issue. Should we look at these pull requests now?
Sure.
Cool. So this one is adding a Docker Compose element so that we can run MySQL locally, right? Cool. Are your changes still relevant?
So my concern was that we're currently in application.properties and he's proposing switching that to application.yaml. So it will be a breaking change if we do not address that. So With the YAML, we can then make it 12-factor. With application.properties, it resembles more legacy applications, legacy monoliths, but it will introduce some complexity to the merge.
Okay. I mean, I think this is good for a starting point, and we can iterate on it. Thoughts? Okay. Do you want to approve that and I'll merge it?
Sure.
Cool. And then I had an idea. But okay. Is this approved yet?
Should be.
I can use my administrator powers, but I don't want to do that. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong PR, that's why. Cool. Yay. And then your charts one, this is the one that we looked at last week where you're just adding.
Template for both MySQL stable and then, or instructions for that in the README, and then the entire Helm deployment for the Java prototype. In addition, it adds the Java prototype SQL table creation that can be manually entered through those same instructions.
Okay.
And one thing that we added to this that wasn't present in the demo last week was the variable exchange for local versus cloud deployment, which is an if statement in the deployment template.
Okay. Does this have any?
A mouthful. If anyone has questions about that, feel free to jump in and ask.
Okay. I mean, this is what we looked at on your demo, so I think this is pretty sane to bring in. I guess my one question would be, do we have an ingress set up already?
There is not an ingress included in this, in part because I wanted us to do that as a team to see the challenges of a service type of node port versus cluster IP versus load balancer.
Okay, let's.
I know that you had a contour merge previously, so I interfere with that.
Totally. Let's add a card for that, right?
On the Helm chart you've got there, are you using dependencies for a MySQL chart, or are you doing MySQL separately at the moment?
That's a great question. So I wanted to mimic what most of us will see in a production migration of a monolith, which would be somewhat of a hybrid approach, where you would have RDS or Cloud SQL that's managed as a service, or perhaps you already have Trello or a VM cluster running your production database. And so there is no dependency in this chart so that we could deploy Java prototype and iterate through those deployments separate from the backend. I hope at some point we do move to having a dependency, but I built it such that it would mirror what we see in production today.
Okay. I vote we pull this in and then we add the ingress component as one of our cards that we can look at doing either at the end of this call or on a future call.
Perfect.
Cool. So one of the things that I think would be helpful to see on this board would be things that we can do on the call together, and then also things that we can do concurrently as well. Might be, we could just track those in the tracker.
At this point.
Somebody's got their microphone on and there's a little bit of background noise coming through. Let's see. Any idea who that was? I can.
I think it's resolved.
Let me share my screen again. Okay. So yeah, I think adding the ingress and doing an audit and coming up with a plan for MySQL is something we can both do, or we can all do together on the call. Is there any other things that we would like to do together as a team?
Last week we did have the discussion of whether or not we want to keep this Java-centric or add other monoliths into sort of an overarching, how do you migrate PHP? How do you migrate, JavaScript, that type of thing. So I don't know if we want to necessarily add a card for this or just put it in issues, but it was something that we had tabled from last week.
Okay. I think that's a good idea, and I think if we can use, we can rename this repository to something a little less Java-y. This is just like a reflection of that first call we had a year ago. It would be useful if we started to flesh out the repository, sort of like a set of examples in a resource. So if we had examples of Java and PHP, Ruby, JavaScript, whatever, those could just live in respective directories, and then within each of them we have readmes, notes, examples, make files, whatever we need to get all this stuff up and running. Cool. I'm going to add that as I'm going to call that repository restructure. Which means we probably want to rename the repository as well. I think that's something we can do together on the call if we want, or we can add that as an issue for somebody to take offline. Anything else for stuff we want to do together as a team? I think it would be interesting to have the application running and starting to try to hook MySQL up as a slave and reading from the slave. So the Helm chart MySQL that's running in Kubernetes would be a slave to the real MySQL running on a virtual machine, and then see what the app does. Do we want to try to go through that today?
We could. We may run into, well, one of the questions is, do we want this chart and deployment to be in AWS? And if so, we may have some additional issues to resolve for the persistent volume on the back end. It was super simple to set it up with the default persistent storage class in GKE, but when I did the same demo for AWS-centric group earlier this week, there were issues. So I stripped out persistence altogether in order to complete the demo. But I think it would be best if we, now that that's merged, if we just step through your deployment of this onto your Kubernetes instance, and then we can resolve any issues that might occur in that deployment.
That works for me. Do we want to have an issue for the persistency and Amazon issue that you just mentioned?
Only if we hit it.
Okay. Understood. So let's make sure I'm even online. Okay, good. So we're still online. Can you guys see that okay?
Yes.
Let me see. Can I shrink this at all? Cool. So we have our Kubernetes instance up and running, which is, let's see, we have Heptio test master in Node, which I think is used for another use case. And we have Java prototype master in Node as well. So that's the one we're talking to. Here's our MySQL server, and here is the Java prototype application as well that I think is completely broken at this point.
Yeah, it doesn't resolve.
Do we need to hit it on 8080?
I think the app is so well written that you actually have to stand up the JVM again.
Oh, wow. Okay, so that's good. At least it's broken, so we can go debug that if we need to later.
Just a question. I'm slowly catching up on this. Have we done? And I did miss the demo as well, which I'll try and rewatch. But we talked about the how we know that the migration has been successful. If this is obvious and easy to answer, brilliant. Ignore me. But one of the challenges I've found in the past is there are very rarely well written monolith is working correctly. Do we know what we're checking for post-migration or during the migration?
So we've talked about that a little bit, I think, on the second or third call. We didn't do a formal success criteria discussion, which I think would probably be a good idea. But I think we're all kind of, like you said, like in agreement that success criteria here is migrating the data set as is, and then ultimately cutting over to the Kubernetes cluster real time, taking that process and documenting it, and then we were going to try to find either one of my blogs or another real website and actually do a real cutover real time.
Okay, got you. I'll go back and watch the previous calls. So
okay,
cool, thanks.
And I added a card for us to discuss the success criteria.
Okay. Do we want to do that first, or do we want to try? I guess it would probably be better to do that first.
Well, potentially, we'll need to know what errors we're running into before we even attempt the migration.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like even just like, hey, we tried to do it, just try to move it just to see what we saw. And now that we kind of know what errors, let's go through a more formal success criteria exercise and figure out what work needs to be done then. Okay. Okay. One of the things that I am kind of like assuming we're going to get into is like, we'll SSH into this MySQL server here. We need to get a good game plan in place of what we need to do to this server to start replicating data. And then we'll need to go and we'll need to update the Helm chart, or not the Helm chart, but the MySQL server in Kubernetes as well. So I think that update right there is going to be like the meat and potatoes of like this whole exercise. Like it's really easy to get MySQL up and running in Kubernetes. The problem is operating it and changing it over time. And without a MySQL operator in place, that might be pretty hard to do. But we'll see.
Right, and I know a previous conversation from last week was whether or not we wanted this to be a replica set to give us a full production ready instance of MySQL rather than just a single container and therefore a single point of failure. So we can put that into the success criteria as well. Perhaps use this deployment in Kubernetes on the first pass to say we've tested it and resolved it, and then our production ready ETL would be into a replica.
Okay. Okay, so let's start coming up with a proposal to migrate MySQL then, unless anybody wants to focus on one of the other action items we just went over. Oh. I think we can track it here in this Google Doc. Just as a place to take notes. So an audit and just see what we have in place, and then we can talk about what we're going to want to do here. So we should be able to SSH into our server. Very good. And we can check and see that MySQL is running. So it is. And let's validate that we can connect to our MySQL server as well. Okay, so we were able to list some rows here. So do we want to use the Helm chart that we already have for the GKE work, or are we looking at actually writing a static manifest for this from scratch? I think both are sane approaches. I think Helm is probably going to be a little bit easier, but I think we're going to learn a lot if we go the static manifest approach.
I agree, both are valid. The Helm allow us to iterate through some deployments as we approach getting it to production. So if we want to then become a replica set rather than a single instance, that would be far easier to do in Helm than in the manifest.
Totally agree. Should we start with installing Helm from the Helm charts repository, or should we copy the Helm chart down and run it from locally so we can modify it? I think you already have a copy in the repo now that we just merged. Should we use that, or did you mention that that might run into problems if we try to run that in Amazon?
It should be fine. If we have to switch persistence just for the call to get it to stand up and then debug that async, we can. But if you go to it's merged in now, I believe. So if you go to the README, it should give instructions on how to stand up that MySQL from the stable charts repo.
Okay. Let's go ahead and do that. Sorry, trying to zoom in my terminal here. So at least we can have a split screen. Cool, so we should have, do we have a charts directory? No, we do not. Let's open this up in an IDE so it's easier for us to look at.
It's named Java prototype. Yeah, it's.
Okay.
Yeah.
I don't want to make you guys look at the terminal. If we can do it here with an actual file explorer. Can you guys read that okay?
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So this is our app deployment, and this is also our MySQL deployment?
No, so if you go to the README.
Yep, which I have not read.
And it may be easier for folks to read it off of GitHub, unless you have a preview. So where it begins with deployment 1, the MySQL database container, we can change those exports to any values that we want. Currently, that password is hard-coded to Heptio rather than password, but we can modify it to our heart's content and then just change it.
Okay. So we'll go through these steps and we should get MySQL up and running. Creating a Java prototype namespace. I do not have Kubernetes installed. Can I do this without that tool?
You can. Yeah, we've got the namespace in the Helm install flag. So you've already set that as your export. You should be good to go.
So I can just skip this step here?
Absolutely.
Cool. So I can Helm install this now?
Should be able to.
Let's see. Do I have Helm installed? Oh, good. Thanks, TGIK. And I have deploy name set. Yeah, okay. That looks good to me. Not fighting tiller. Oh, are we gonna run into the RBAC thing again that I had to fix on TGIK?
You can look in the cube system namespace to see if it's falling over, but it could just be taking a while to pull the image.
Let's see.
It's running. You're good.
Nope.
Uh-oh.
Let's see if I can remember how to do this. Oh, this was such a pain.
I just pasted the commands in the chat.
Oh, thanks. Is it in the Git chat?
In the
Okay,
Zoom chat.
let me stop. I can't figure out how to open up the Zoom chat. Awesome, thank you.
You may need to kill the existing Helm tiller.
Where did you get those commands from? Because I would really like to have those like handy for moments like this.
1 second. I actually got them from a Medium post I wrote because it annoyed the hell out of me. And I've actually got some aliases / functions to install and delete Helm.
Oh, wow. I need to be more like you and actually document this stuff the right way. I'm like, it's in a YouTube video somewhere. Oh, okay. I was like, what is this HTTPS? That's the link to your blog. Okay. I'm going to add all of this to document here, just so we have it. Cool. So we think we need to restart the tiller pod.
So I added a one line if you just want to curl, that will do it all as well. Oh, you guys already have it in there. Never mind.
What is this one liner? Oh, I see. So, and that'll install Helm with, or install the RBAC. Got it. So how do we, isn't there a Helm command for restarting tiller?
You'll have to delete the deployment or upgrade after the.
Can I do Helm reset then Helm init again? Yep. Yeah. No, I can't.
If you use the delete section from the blog post, it'll work. It'll just run a few things because they don't exist, but it'll still do it for you.
Helm init service account equals tiller.
Yeah, so if you look, I've got two sections. One's the Helm install, one's the Helm delete.
Yep.
If you just paste the 3 lines from Helm delete in, it'll clear up whatever you've got, and then just paste in the lines from the Helm install, and it will add it all back in.
Fantastic. This is super handy. Cannot find a tiller pod. It said tiller is already installed in cluster.
Do you want to show your screen?
Oh, am I sharing anymore?
No.
Oh, sorry.
Huh.
Let's try this again. So we're deleting the cube system namespace. I like how this is turning into a live debugging section, you guys. So delete tiller deploy. No, I guess my question is if you were in, or never mind. That's the service account. That's not in namespace. And init this again. Tiller is already running. I'm just going to do the tiller deployment.
Yeah.
That's so weird. How's tiller already installed in the cluster?
Maybe it's still in deleting, and so it's getting confused because it can take a few seconds to actually delete stuff.
Okay, let's see. We'll run this again and then we'll watch our pods. I don't see anything tiller in there.
I think Helm is just confused. Yeah, it says it's only 16 seconds old, so that must be the new one. Helm LS yet?
Oh, good. It looks like it's working now. I guess it just needed time to set up.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay, so heading back to getting MySQL installed, we should be able to run this command again. So now we can get our secret and we should be able to connect to our database. Bam. And is this going to install Java prototype from my?
It will, but we need to actually create the table. I think we skipped a if you scroll up slightly, right after you copied the echo, you then have to connect to the MySQL instance to manually install the get requests table into the schema.
And that's this line here?
Yes.
Cool.
You probably have to kubectl exec into the pod first.
Or you can port forward if you want to use your pancake. And we demoed that last week, but it was a quick hit for sure.
Sure. Yeah, we can set up a port forward or exec into the pod. Let's go with pancakes. You want to help me out with this one, Josh?
Sure. So you want to keep control. So you want to get the pod name. And this is where you're going to fall in love with kpoof, I swear, Chris.
Okay. What namespace is this in?
Java prototype.
Yeah. So here's our pod
Copy
name.
the pod name to the buffer.
Okay.
Why are we still in pending status?
I have a feeling it's probably not pulling from whatever image repository we have configured. Interesting. Not seeing any logs there. Is it just pulling still? It's a pretty big image.
The interesting thing is that it's only showing 2 minutes of age with 0 restarts. Did we Oh, no, never mind. We had trouble with the RBAC, so it would only be 2 minutes old. It may be because the PVC is not bound. Can you Cube Control get PV?
What does the scribe show?
On the PV?
Describe on the pod, the deployment, yeah.
On the part of the deployment. So prototype. Yeah, it's not bound.
Right. So we will have to create an issue for this where it works out of the box for the chart on GKE. And it probably would on Azure as well, but we may have to manipulate the storage class for AWS in order for it to bound successfully the box. So this is an example for anyone who is doing multi-cloud deployments to understand the variance between the providers and how they define their storage instances.
Cool. This is good. This is really good stuff.
So we can delete this Helm deployment. Helm delete -- purge. And
or we can use my handy dandy Helm RM alias that I have.
Look at that. Beautiful. And now if you scroll back up in your history to the initial Helm deployment, we can remove the size constraint and do persistence.enabled equals false in order to get at least a working instance in place. There you go. So if you scroll back to size and then delete from there to dot size.
Okay.
And enabled equals false. Hit enter. Now if you watch your pods, yep. Hey, we're getting further.
Look at that. Cool. So now let's get connectivity to this. Do we want to exec in or do we want to port forward? Or proxy, rather?
It's up to you. The port forward will allow you to use the pancake, which may be easier for consumption on the video.
Yeah. Do we have documentation in the README how to do that?
You'll need to grab the secret again, since it's a new deployment.
Cool. And how do we proxy to this thing?
So here we can, yeah, so we can port forward. So in your command line, grab the plot name.
Okay.
And it is running, great. So now cube control port forward, port dash forward. No E.
There we go.
Pod name. And then 3306:3306.
Should we, I feel like we should add this to the docs. I don't know why I keep wanting to add an E there. Cool.
Oh, port forward. Wait, what's happening?
It's wrong namespace, I think.
Oh, gotcha. Yep.
Cool. So now, how do I do this? Don't I come here and I do add database? No. Here it is. Username?
Root.
Great.
I am root.
Yay. Cool.
Cool. So you can select that one and then import. File import.
So just for folks at home, we have our SQL defined here, which is just a simple create for the table that has a couple of rows that we care about.
Just ignore the errors. Whoa.
I think delete your SQL statement.
Interesting. Oh,
Oh.
Yeah.
how did that happen?
That was a good catch.
Moving fast.
There it is.
Cool. So now, this is going to install our application, but we already have that running. So I'm going to keep this port forwarder kind of out of our way for now. So at least it's there. We'll do another split.
Yeah, there was a great comment in the chat indicating how you can store your context for multiple use. And in the README, there's also a directive for those interested to install kubectx and kubeNS,
Okay.
which is demonstrated last week, the utility of that.
Okay. Can we add that to the document, the Google Docs as well? And this is running. And can I port forward into this one as well?
I think we still need to do the actual deployment.
Is that not it there?
That's the MySQL.
Oh, that's MySQL, yeah.
I need to, I think you just created a new window. That line right there that's highlighted, we need to do that installation. Perfect. So now we can port forward this one.
And we're almost out of time too, unfortunately. Is this not, is it running in a different namespace? What are we doing?
It must be. So if you go to the default namespace, I bet it'll appear there. maybe Helm LS, it might tell us. Interesting. I wonder why that's not.
Okay. It's only showing this, that one Helm deployment. Did this not go through? Let's see. Failed to download Java prototype.
Oh, you're not in the working directory. Perfect.
Cool. Okay.
And this is going to fail over with the last issue created before the call. So it's a great place for us to close it, and people can review that if they're interested.
Okay. And then I'll leave.
Too long didn't read is that this is pointing to a private repo, and we need to build and push to a public repo.
Okay. So I'll leave this as is so we can pick up here on our next call. Yeah, and then I think homework is going to be fleshing out the backlog a little bit, cleaning up those issues, and I think it'll probably be meaningful to start highlighting things that we want to do together on the call, like this exercise we just did here, just so that way when we start the next one, we can get all the Helm stuff out of the way before we get folks on the line.
Sounds good.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks for joining, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.